Now it's 8 a.m. for you, something like that, 7 a.m., 8 a.m.?
It is 8 a.m., yeah.
Yeah. It's, getting up so early in the morning, I appreciate that. I did that with Heavy-Eyed, maybe a year or two ago when I started doing this, and I think he was same time zone, same city, I think you said, same town as Heavy-Eyed?
So, Mitch, Heavy-Eyed, he currently lives in New Zealand. So he's actually, I think, an hour or 2 hours ahead. I think it's an hour ahead of me right now. I'm on the east. I'm in Sydney, which is the east coast of Australia. But originally, I'm from the Gold Coast, which is just north into Queensland. And Mitch was also from the Gold Coast. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. I'm pretty sure he's had it in public before. But yeah, we both grew up in the same city. We didn't know each other, but he was a little bit in the south, and I was kind of in the middle. But yeah, it turns out that we grew up in the same city. It's a decent sized city. It's like it's under 1 million, but it's a couple of 100,000 people.
Okay, and I think that's near Brisbane, the Gold Coast.
So Brisbane, it's like an hour south of Brisbane. It's like right on the border of Queensland and New South Wales. Like the border kind of like runs through the city, and you like have half of it on the New South Wales side and half of it on the Queensland side. Not
okay.
half. It's like Tweed City is just like below it. So yeah.
Oh, cool. And kind of looking at it through Google Maps right now, and the geography looks pretty interesting. There's lots of little rivers and canals and stuff, it seems, or from what I can tell on Google Maps.
Yes. So I believe this is what they tell us, but the Gold Coast has more canals than Venice, which is kind of crazy. But they don't use them at all. Like, my one biggest wish is that they would just like, go sort of Venice-y and have all these like, sorry, I'm getting over a sickness. That they would have all these canals and boats and stuff that you could just get around in, but they never used it. But yeah, it is interesting. I love, what I do love about the city is that you do have like the beach right there, and the beaches are very famous and for being beautiful and like great surf and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you go like 15 minutes inland, and it's like this beautiful hinterland of just like rainforests. And then the Gold Coast is just this skinny, long city that goes like for an hour north and south, but it's like 20 minutes deep from the coast. So, but it's totally different, and it's really cool like that. You get best of both worlds.
Must have been a pretty gorgeous place to grow up, somewhere like that.
It was a really lovely place to grow up. It's a very touristy city. So it's a very transient city, so people don't stay there for very long. They come and go. But I was there for like almost 30 years. And I was like, no, I need something that's more of a city. I need a bigger city. I need something where there's always things going on, and where the culture is a little bit more me. The Gold Coast culture is just, it's surfing and it's brunch and it's clubs, lots and lots of like nightclubs. And like, this isn't me. So last year I moved to Sydney, and I've loved it. It hasn't been the experience I was expecting in Sydney with COVID and everything, but
oh no.
Yeah, I love it here.
That's great. And are you finding your musical tastes are more satisfied in Sydney? Are you able to, say, get out into some more musical ventures while you're down there in that city compared to the Gold Coast?
Oh, that was one of the reasons why I did want to move, is that there's just, again, so much more going on and a lot of shows going on. On the Gold Coast, there was nothing ever on the Gold Coast. It was very rare that I went to a show that was on the Gold Coast, because I'm not very involved in the local scene. Mm-hmm. So I'd had to go up to Brisbane, which was about an hour by car or by train. And that was fine, but it was just an inconvenience. So moving into Sydney, I'm like 30 minutes into the city, even closer to the inner west. I'm basically the inner west, which is where all the sort of cultural stuff happens. And but I only got to use it like once before kind of COVID struck. And I went and saw Carly Rae Jepsen, which was amazing, and I loved it. So at least I got one experience in before I went. But
And how is the lockdown treating you in Sydney? Is it are you allowed to leave your house and stuff right now, or is it pretty, a bit more open?
yeah, Australia's been really good. Well, I say that. We are currently in the midst of our second wave, and it's much worse than the first.
Yeah.
Yes. But to be honest, Australia is very strict in general with quarantine. If you've ever come to Australia, you know that like you must go through quarantine. You must declare stuff. We're very terrified of things crossing our border and infecting Australia.
Fruits and vegetables and species of birds, that kind of thing.
Precisely, yeah. And the couple of things that we have introduced have just like ruined the ecosystem.
Cats, I think, is one of them.
Cats, yeah. Cane toads is the big one up in Queensland.
Oh, like in The Simpsons.
Like in The Simpsons, exactly, yeah. We brought cane toads over in order to... there was this like cane beetle that would eat all the sugar cane, and we're like, oh, we'll just get this like this toad that eats the beetle, and then they just like got out of hand, and now it's ridiculous. And rabbits was the other one as well.
Oh,
but
okay.
But what was I talking about? Quarantine.
COVID,
yeah. So we're usually like we're really onto this sort of stuff usually, which means our response was actually pretty decent. From a government sort of level. The problem is the public and getting the public on board and that sort of stuff, and not interrupting our life. And the government haven't been like terribly good at like shutting down the economy, which like fair, but basically we were bad for a month or two, and then it kind of like petered out. But then Melbourne kind of had this outbreak, and now we're getting much worse as a country than we ever have, but it's mainly concentrated in Melbourne or Victoria. And Sydney, we've had like little clusters, little outbreaks. And so I feel like at any point it could kind of just explode, like it has in Melbourne. But we're doing okay for the time being. It's like here in Sydney, it's like 15 cases a day or something. In Melbourne, it's like 400 or 500.
Okay. Cheers.
And then everywhere else, it's like 1 or 2.
Yeah. Well, hopefully if they clamp down on it sooner rather than later. But then again, I don't know how they can avoid it spreading again as soon as people start flying and moving to different countries. It seems inevitable in some regards.
Oh, yeah. That's not going to happen until we have a vaccine.
Yeah.
Which is like 2021. Our big airline has said they're not even operating until like July 2021 for international. So
yeah, it's I work in a travel agency myself, so dealing with this kind of stuff, cancellations, refunds, that's that kind of thing is what I do all day. And all the airlines, a lot of the smaller airlines are going bust. There were some pretty big South American airlines as well, slowly but surely.
Yeah. Are you still working through this? Like, do you still have to be like cancelling things for people, or like organising some sort of like people getting back or?
Yeah, so as a travel agency, we're kind of tied to the rules that the airline set for their tickets. So we can only action things to what the airline allows us to. We can't go outside of what they say is refundable or isn't refundable. Right now we've cleared a large section of cancellation requests that were coming in. So when you have an airline ticket, one of the most important things to do is if you want to make a change to it or a cancellation or something like that, is to get it done before the scheduled departure that you have, because that way you can remove the segments that you have, the ticket remains in open status, and then you can kind of do what you need to do on the ticket. So when we have hundreds of thousands of requests coming in all at once, our main job was to, cancel the segments, keep them in open status, and then we can go through them and see what we can do, if it's a refund or if it's a credit or that kind of thing. So that backlog, as we called it, is pretty much done now, thankfully.
Great.
Which is very good. The problem with being a travel agency is not all airlines act the same way in the booking system. So if you work for WestJet, for example, you can pretty much automate everything very, very quickly because everything's the same in your system. But when you work for a travel agency, you got WestJet, Air Canada, British Airways, some small South American carrier, and they all do things slightly differently. So it's been a bit of a task to get it all automated, but we're almost done, and things are looking up very much. So it's good. Yeah, it's looking a bit better, I would say.
Wonderful. I work in retail, and there's a travel agency right next to me, and they just stayed open the entire time. And I'm like, what are they doing? No one's coming in.
No one's going there. I think there was a drop from. I'm trying to remember the data that we saw. It's on the top of my head. There was something like a 70% drop in air travel during the period of COVID. Although the recovery is looking good. It's looking more V-shaped than petering off as a recovery. So it's looking like there's a big bounce back, especially for domestic travel. International is still subdued, but domestic is picking up. And I'm actually going to... Yeah, it is, yeah. As it stands right now, I'm going to be heading back to the UK at the end of August. Right now I'm in Canada, and my visa expires at the end of August. So as soon as I get to the UK, I've got to self-isolate for 2 weeks.
Good luck with that. Like, just the whole getting over and then like having to isolate and start a new life. Like, it's a bad time to be heading back. That's stressful.
Yeah, it's not the greatest, but luckily I can just move straight back into home. I can work remotely for this job. I can keep working. I play games, so I can be a recluse for 2 weeks. But it seems kind of strange to me that I live in Birmingham, which is about 2 or 3 hours drive, about 3 hours drive away from London, and they also describe it as the Venice of England as well, because we've got so many canals, but no one uses them. And yeah, so my flight is into London, but I still got to get a train from London to Birmingham, then to the small town outside of Birmingham, and get a taxi somewhere. So it's like it's barely self-isolating along the way. Like,
it's a bit of a journey.
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
My wife is from Buckinghamshire.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah, not like the like non-fancy part of Buckinghamshire. But yeah, the whole area is just so beautiful going to that sort of area. I've been over twice now. Haven't gone as far as Birmingham, but it's kind of in the same direction, isn't it?
Don't bother going past Buckinghamshire. It's pretty scummy, Birmingham. It's kind of gross. I don't like it. Genuinely, you're not missing out on much. Just kind of stay to London if you want to get a feel for somewhere else. Skip the middle and then go to like Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield in the north, York.
Yeah, last time we were here, we went to Manchester, and when we were talking to everyone, they're like, "What are you doing while you're over here?" And I wanted to go to Manchester because I think just because it's had such a big music scene, and it's kind of famous because it's got a football team and that sort of stuff. So when you think of like English cities, you kind of think of London, you think of Manchester and Liverpool and stuff. And I was like, let's go to Manchester. And Caitlin's like, all right, let's just go to Manchester. And then whenever we would tell our friends or her friends what we were doing when we were over in England, we're like, oh, we're going to go to Manchester. And they're all like, why?
Well, what did you think of it in the end when you went?
It was interesting. I don't think we were in the nicest part of Manchester, so there was like a little bit of like uncomfortability when we first got there, and we were like, we don't know how safe this is. But that might have been just more me. Maybe Caitlin was feeling a bit better about it, kind of being English. But it was lovely. We stayed in this really nice Airbnb, and we went to the library there, which was beautiful, and we just kind of walked around, and we were only there for a short time, but it was a nice little getaway.
Yeah, it's quite a pretty city. In terms of the safety, it is a safe place. I think it's more kind of the Northern English vibe. It's a bit more rough and tumble, working class, cheap pints, muddy boots, walking dogs kind of thing.
It was, and this was also like maybe a month or two after the bombing at the Ariana Grande concert.
Oh, yes.
So everything was still very much in this weird sort of, I don't know, it was this weird sort of vibe of like mourning, but also like celebrating Manchester. And just a bit of confusion, I guess. So
Yeah, exactly. And how did you end up meeting your wife as she's from Buckinghamshire and you're all the way from Australia? What was the story there?
So her mother is Australian.
Ah, okay.
And then her mother moved over to the UK and met her father. And then when she went to uni, she came back to Australia because she wanted to go to the uni that I went to. And that's how we met.
And which university was that?
Griffith University on the Gold Coast.
Okay, so you met in the Gold Coast. Okay.
Yeah, because her mother's from this area originally. So when she moved back, then we went to this, like she came here to, like, she wanted to go to this university in particular because it's from the area that her mum was from and stuff.
Oh, that's quite sweet. That's very nice.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask you about your musical background. Your YouTube channel focuses very heavily on music, particularly video games. As it stands, you have just under 73,000 subscribers, and you're around 2.8 million views. What's your background with music, and is it your profession?
No, it's not my profession. I'm not. I can't play any instruments. I've never written music. I've never done any of that. I'm just a fan. I guess I did a year of trombone in primary school, but that's the extent of my musical knowledge. It gave me a very basic sort of working understanding of music theory and how to read music and stuff. But that's really about it. My history with music is just as a fan. It's just something that has always kind of spoke to me. And I guess when I was I remember as early as 7 or something, having favorite songs and it meaning something to me. Mm-hmm. I remember with video game music in particular, it was when I discovered Final Fantasy VIII, which is my favorite game, and for some reason that music just kind of spoke to me in a way that nothing else had before, and I would use questionably legal means to download songs from that game. LimeWire fam, where you at? And actually no, that was before LimeWire. This was Kazaa.
Kazaa, wow, okay, so that's going back a bit.
It is going back, yeah. So yeah, and then it was probably I know I've had certain sort of points in my life where music all of a sudden meant something a lot more to me, and those were kind of age 10 with Final Fantasy VIII, and then 15, 16 with I kind of found myself in at high school I was part of the Christian clique. I was going through my Christian phase. So I was into all the Christian rock bands like Reliant K and Amberlin and that sort of stuff. And then when I was 18, I got really, really, really into the Killers.
Yeah.
And they were just the best thing in the world. And I was obsessed. And then I from there, I kind of made my way into indie and alternative music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I genuinely expected when I had to ask that question, you're going to be oh yeah, at the age of 7, I was playing violin and the trombone, and I studied musical theatre or something. I did not expect that you played trombone for a little bit in secondary school.
I only played trombone because I hated the class I was in grade 7. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any friends, and the one guy I was kind of friends with the last year was in this class, but we had a falling out, and one of my other friends was in the music class, and just one day the teacher walks in being we've got space in the music class. Does anybody want to swap classes? And I'm yep, me. They're you're going to have to learn an instrument. I'm all right.
And who knew that 15 years later you'd be starting a YouTube channel?
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm a complete fraud.
That's incredible. I absolutely love that. Well, you fooled me. I'll give you that. Looking back, you started your channel in 2017, March 5th of 2017. What made you decide to start that channel to begin with that very first video that you made?
So I have a long history with YouTube. It goes well before Game Score Fanfare. I started YouTube when I was in high school. I think I started in 2007, I think. So like early days of YouTube, I started a video blog. And in high school, I was kind of known as that guy who did YouTube videos, and I was like ridiculed for it. I was bullied for it, and it just like was not a cool thing to do, which like, had I done it 10 years later, I would have been the coolest kid.
Oh, yeah.
There. But at the time, it was kind of just, it was not a cool thing to do. It was, not great. So, but I did it because I really loved it. And I started to like become part of the community. Like the Australian YouTube vloggers community was very small and tight-knit at the time. So I went down to like a couple of gatherings, as we called them. So down in Melbourne and stuff, and I met some friends, and just kind of met some overseas friends as well who were part of that community, some creators. And I never knew what to do with it because I was just talking about myself, and I hated talking about myself and vlogging. So I'd make a video maybe once every 6 months or something, and I kind of just dropped it over university. But then once I finally completed my university degree with a great deal of difficulty, I got a full-time job working in a school, and it was a science degree. And
same as me.
Yeah, nice. And what science did you do?
Physics. Well, bachelor's in physics, and I did a postgraduate diploma in education. So, nice. Physics teacher. But after I got that, I left promptly. I was like,
well, this is a similar sort of story for me. I did like human anatomy and stuff. I wanted to be a doctor originally. But then I realized I was terrible at it, and I didn't. I do find it interesting. I find like the microbiology, diseases, like infectious diseases stuff particularly interesting. But I worked in a school just like setting up the science experiments and stuff for a bit. But after a couple of years, I was like, this is not me, and there's no progression for me in this area, I feel. And I just feel so like creatively unfulfilled. I feel like so empty. And I was always a bit of a creative kid, but I never kind of realized that, I never realized it. And so I just needed to, do something a little bit creative, more creatively fulfilling. So I started this other channel that I was talking about games, and that kind of drew me into the world of like the video game analysis sort of crowd. I think I just kind of discovered Mark Brown and went from there.
Yes. Yeah.
And but I was also doing some music related videos on that channel. I was doing like album reaction videos with a friend, so we'd just like listen to an album and talk about it.
Yeah.
And all the while I was planning to leave my job and just give YouTube a try. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with my career, and there wasn't a lot of options for me. And I was like, I had all these hobbies of like YouTube and video games and music, and I was like, I just have too many hobbies and I don't have enough time to do all my hobbies and work full time. So how can I turn one of these hobbies potentially into a job? And I was like, well, YouTube is like going to be the best bet. Like online video is rocketing. It's going to be, in the next 10 years, 80% or whatever of the internet is going to be like online video. And this is happening in the middle of like pivot to video and everything. So I'm like, this is definitely somewhere that I could try and make a living at least. And so I left my job, and I said I'd give myself a year. And I made Game Score Fanfare because I wanted to make something that was, something that I wanted to watch myself, ultimately. There was no video essays out there really about game music. And there was like 8-Bit Music Theory, but he very much involved with music theory and very deep. And that's something that I don't understand. Like I have no training in music theory apart from 1 year of trombone in grade 7. Like I love his videos, but like they can be very difficult to kind of get the most of when you don't know that. And I think there's a lot there. I know I fall into this trap a lot, but there is this kind of this thinking or this idea that the only thing worth discussing about music is theory.
Yeah.
And I as much as I do fall into that trap a lot, I don't believe that's true. I believe that there's a lot more that can be taken out of, the cultural aspects of it and the emotion. I think emotion is really important in music, and this is all tied to music theory, but it can exist outside of it as well. Like, you don't need to understand music theory in order to be emotionally impacted by a song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also there's also the idea of game music just being like having all this interactivity and links with the story and all that kind of stuff as well, like kind of being like film scores in that way. So I was like, there's heaps to talk about here, and it's a nice sort of like blending of my hobbies of games and music. So that's how the channel started.
Wow, it's really cool. Do any of those old videos exist from the vlogging days? Are they hidden in the depths of YouTube?
Yeah.
Or are they gone forever? Oh, you still got them?
No, they're still up. If you know like my usernames around the place, you can find them.
Okay. I didn't do enough digging before this interview, apparently. Oh my God.
Apparently not. They're very embarrassing, but it's something that I've seen a couple of other people say, in that we all start somewhere. And, if you looked at the first video on Game Score Fanfare, it's not great, but it definitely could be worse. Like, it's obvious that I sort of have an understanding of editing, and a very basic understanding on that first video. A lot of people don't. And I only had that because I had been making YouTube videos for years and years and years before. And so, like, whenever you go to someone's old videos, usually they won't be that great. And I think that's really important to do because, or to have up there, because it shows that, like, anybody can start this, anybody can just make these videos. You get better over time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to keep them up.
And with the editing that you have done, if I recall correctly, in one of your videos, you mentioned you were looking for a job in video editing. Is that still something you're looking into, or is there a different path you're trying to go down at this stage?
That would be nice. I've never actually done any sort of like freelance work in editing, so that didn't happen. But if I could, because I'm currently working like part-time retail.
It's got to be tough right now.
Well, we were kind of declared essential in a weird way. Actually, I'm casual, so all the full-timers took time off, and I just got their hours. So actually, I'm doing okay.
Oh, that's pretty good. So is it like a food industry or something, or clothing, maybe something?
Oh, it's like an electronics retailer.
Essential?
Yeah, so like when it all kind of happened, people needed to work from home, and so we sell computers, and we sell monitors, which people needed, and we sell webcams, which people needed, and microphones, and but also like I work in the DVD and CDs department, so but also like just on the front counter as well. So, but it's good to have that sort of casual job at the moment, and actually make money. So I'm casual there, and I do like online video stuff part-time, like just basically whatever I make from Patreon for Game Score Fanfare. And so yeah, I've never done any sort of like editing work outside of that. But if I could do online video full-time, I mean, that would be a dream.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be perfect, wouldn't it? Looking at your videos, could you run us through your creative process from when you get the idea for a video to the final product? Do you kind of think, I'd like to make a video on this, you put all your attention to it, you'll play it through 5 times, capture the video the 6th time? Kind of what's your steps in going from idea to creation?
Yeah, it's not a well-oiled machine, I can tell you that, no. Which is why I'm not very consistent. But like I really started as I kind of said, Game Score Fanfare to kind of learn how to do everything. I wanted to learn how to write better. I wanted to learn how to edit videos in a proper sort of way. So it all starts with an idea and just something that I am passionate about. If there's no sort of passion behind it, then like I can't really bring myself to do it, unfortunately. So once that's like something stirs in me, I will try, or I'll do my research. Sometimes it'll be more, the history behind it and stuff, which is, my current video. I'm working on a video about Streets of Rage, and a lot of that is based on, the history of EDM and in particular house music, and kind of the history of FM synth, which was, really big in the 80s, and like keyboard synthesizers. And like that's all really important. So going into that history, but other times it'll be like very analysis driven, where it's my own sort of thoughts. But that's all in the same sort of field of research, is kind of deciding the angle of the video. And then I write, and that takes a long time because I am a perfectionist when it comes to this. And I have this warped idea that everything I do is a reflection of like my abilities and my personality and who I am. So it takes me forever to write, probably a couple of weeks, depending on the script. This is while I'm working like casually as well. So
yeah.
Then I edit, which again takes another couple of weeks because I always want to try and push myself and learn something new and try and get better, like creating this sort of design, I guess. So like if basically I'm kind of like, if I'm not doing something new or learning something or pushing myself in some sort of way, then what's the point? Because I'm doing this to learn and to get better. So yeah, that's kind of my process, I guess.
Awesome. And do you ever work on multiple things at once, or are you honed in on one topic that you'll see from start to finish?
I'd like to be able to work on multiple things at once. And I always have like multiple ideas going at once, but I can really only focus my energy on one project at a time. But like I'll have ideas and I'll write them down and I'll be like, oh, let's flesh this out a little bit more, and I'll flesh it out, and that might be unrelated to something else, but I will only be able to kind of like, focus my attention squarely on one project at a time.
Gotcha. And with your channel focusing so much on the music of games, do you find you're often hit by copyright infringements? And is there a way to kind of get around this? Because looking at other content creators on Twitter, on YouTube, example, a lot of the times I'll see them posting about, this has been taken down by a copyright claim because of the music. Is that something that you've managed to get around somehow?
Yeah, Content ID on YouTube is a problem. And copyright in general is a problem. Mm-hmm. Obviously, everything that I do, I can't speak for every single person out there, but like in the analysis crowd and stuff and the video essay crowd, like everything we do is comes under fair use, and that gets abused. The Content ID system gets abused by the big companies, especially like the record labels and stuff.
Yeah.
I have never had any problems with it, not when I'm doing game music stuff. I don't know if that's because it's just a little bit, like that they're a bit more lax on them, that the record labels aren't as strict about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just because having that sort of understanding of what constitutes fair use, and I just make sure that I am covered by fair use, and I only use, Discord's being weird, that I only use, 10 seconds or 12 seconds or something of music, and I comment on it and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then like earlier this year, I started making some videos on just regular music, like albums and stuff. And I did the exact same sort of process, and every one of them has been hit by copyright claims.
Oh God.
None of them have been taken down. One of them is still like it's not eligible to be monetized, but the other two are now that I contested them. But yeah, so I think it's just game music is a bit more lax, and I've been really lucky that I haven't had to deal with a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty good, because I kind of imagine that the automatic YouTube bots or something would be able to pick out, 10 seconds of unedited and, just music from a game, and they would have just struck that straight away. But it's interesting to hear how the game music isn't as affected as much as album music.
Yeah, I can do 12, 15 seconds, have no problems with game music. I can do about 4 seconds and get copyright claimed with album stuff, like regular music.
Ariana Grande.
Yeah, exactly. Ariana Grande and the Tame Impala one, they went bad. But like the other one I made on Sufjan Stevens and Julian Baker, I have this like section at the end where I just let one song play while I talk over it at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Julian Baker, and she's covering this hymn called In Christ Alone, like this modern hymn. But that got copyright claimed, and it's like a minute because I just let it play under my audio, under my narration. And I'm like, oh, that's fair. I can't, I can't really take that. I'm not commenting on it. I'm just using it as background music. So I just kind of let that one slide. That's fine. I understand that might not be fair use.
You got me on that one, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of the videos you made for Stevens and Julian Baker, I'd like to ask, are you a very spiritual person? It seems to me, you talked earlier about being part of the Christian group at school, and you've done videos about Christian music, and you mentioned it a few times on your Twitter as well. How important is spirituality to you in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, it is really important. So I kind of found myself involved with the church, the Christian church, in high school. I kind of started going to this youth group, and like my family are not religious, but I kind of got caught up in that and kind of discovered it, and it kind of it made sense to me. Not only like this spiritual sort of aspect of it, but just this sort of philosophy and lifestyle that Jesus kind of preached of, making peace, and his radical sort of like almost like anti-authoritarian sort of stance that he had. But yeah, the way he kind of like took everything and turned it upside down and was like, no, love your enemies and this sort of stuff. It really spoke to me, in his sort of pacifism and peacekeeping. So that was something that I was really important to me in my like teenage years. And then I worked for the church for a year in like doing youth group stuff, and I did a sort of short course in youth work.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I realized I don't want to work in the church. It's very political. And, I feel like it's a very personal sort of thing. It's like spirituality and stuff. Like my faith is very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so like over the years, I've definitely like become more comfortable with my faith, for better or worse. And it's definitely something that's like really important to me. It's just like not something that it used to define my identity, which is, what a good Christian is meant to be. But I definitely feel like recently, like I've like since coming to Sydney, like I've struggled to find a church that really like speaks to me, or like that I fit into, and I kind of like my ideas of God have gotten a bit like a bit, I don't know how to describe it, but the more traditional sort of churches wouldn't be very happy with my sort of ideas of God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In that it's just like, I think we legitimately worship the kind of like notion of love. as Christians. We say God is love, and it's like, well, that's pretty obvious that we just like love is our God. I do believe in like a legitimate God who created the universe and stuff. I think it's hard to explain. Sorry, I'm being very all over.
Oh God, no! It's a pretty big topic to throw into a morning podcast.
I've just become a lot more comfortable with my faith, and it's still very important to me. Yeah.
So the way that I kind of understood that is, have you found from your recent life experiences that your idea of faith has molded to your new outlook on life in some regards, that what you could have seen as more solid rules as when you're in your teenage years are a bit more flexible in the way you perceive them now as you're older?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people kind of think that is just comes across as being like, oh, you're just like fitting your religion into your idea of what you want it to be. But it's kind of like the opposite thing for me, where I came to Christianity and I was like, oh, this is me. Like, this just makes so much sense for me. Like, I don't feel like I changed too much when I became a Christian. Like, I feel like I was already kind of that person, and I was like, oh, I found my people. Oh, I found like, I think that's part of the reason why it resonated with me so much, is because what they were saying, this is, the image of God, this is who God is. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense to me. And so over time, like, maybe my perception has sort of changed, but it still comes from this sort of like this core understanding of who I believe God is, that is informed by the Bible, obviously. And that's a God of love and like acceptance and understanding. And so like a lot of people might be like, a lot of Christians are very upset about like LGBT issues and that sort of stuff. But like, I don't believe that the Bible, or I don't believe that Jesus was homophobic. I don't think he actually ever mentioned homosexuality at all as an issue for him. It was all Paul and like early Old Testament stuff. And like, a lot of Christians have issues with like, trans identity stuff, but I'm like, God was trans. Like, God created humans in his image, male and female. He created us. Like,
yeah.
God is genderless. Like, God is
he's gender fluid.
God is gender fluid, like, legitimately. I just think that like my perception, maybe has changed a little bit since I was back then, because back then I wasn't sure about like my stance on LGBT issues and that sort of stuff. But my understanding of God has informed that and made me go, no, like, these are human beings who have been made by God, and like nothing that we can do or be can separate us from the love of God.
And how have you found your religion to be accepted in the YouTube community? Because my idea of kind of online as a encompassing word, maybe taking the idea from Reddit, I suppose, is this kind of a hive mind mentality, and a lot of people on the internet would identify as maybe atheist or agnostic. Have you found that being Christian and being a prominent figure online on YouTube has come under fire in any way, or you've had negative experiences from being a Christian?
No, not at all. And that has been because I'm not like terribly outspoken as a Christian. I make it very, I don't shy away from it or anything. I'll make videos talking about my faith and that sort of stuff. And on Twitter, I talk about it a little bit. But I don't think it's widely known. It's not like my immediate, like, I don't think that when people think of me, they think I'm a Christian. And like to an extent, like I don't think of that myself either. Like I think my identity is in lots of places. But like all the people who do know and have found out, like I've never had anybody be antagonistic about it at all. No.
Yeah, that's good. And in your videos regarding Christian music, your Crisis of Faith video, you discuss how the artists express their faith through music themselves. If you don't mind me asking, have you ever had any big crises of faith yourself? My instinct is, when you just talked there, is no, because you came to Christianity yourself as a teenager rather than being brought up as a Christian. But have you ever had any big crisis of faith moments?
No, everybody does. Coincidentally, the name of a Julian Baker song that I talked about in that video. But no, like I think in order to really fully understand and want to grow deeper in your relationship with God, you have to question it, which is the whole kind of point of that video, was that like just because they had doubts and like insecurities around God doesn't make them bad Christians. Like it just comes from a desire of wanting to know God better, essentially. So like, yeah, of course, like I've definitely gone through that. There have been many times where I'm like, am I even a Christian anymore? Like, is this what I believe? But yeah, you kind of just most of the time just come through it. I've come through it because, yeah, it just kind of, as I said, speaks to me on this really personal sort of level that just makes sense to me.
Going back to your video production and the game music, 1 year later after making your video about the memorability of video game music, do you think games are becoming less memorable still, or have recent games in the past year kind of elevated music in video games to be more memorable like they were in the past, even though, may have been due to limitations of hardware?
Well, I think the point that I was kind of making in that video was that I don't think games have become any less memorable. I think we just remember them for different reasons. It was like game music. I think we remember it for different reasons. So, nowadays it's a lot more about the emotion behind it. But I did obviously discuss ways that like the early tunes were such earwormy and that sort of thing. But a year in the grand scheme of things isn't a long time. And to be honest, I haven't kept up to date that much with like game music that's come out in the past year. The one that I can think of that I've been listening to a lot is the Streets of Rage 4 soundtrack, which is incredible and like very memorable for like all these various reasons. Part of which is because like it takes like Yuzo Koshiro, the original composer for Streets of Rage, worked on a couple of key tracks there, and it gets a bunch of the old video game composers to do all the boss tracks. So you get like Yoko Shimomura doing a track and some others that are escaping me at the moment, some of the classics. But then you've also got like these really cool tracks from like it's kind of headed up by Olivier de Riviere, who he worked on what has he worked on, like Remember Me and Alone in the Dark. He's like one of the most exciting like video game music composers out there at the moment, in my opinion. And he like there's some really interesting tracks that are very inspired by like Aphex Twin and Justice that are actually like really memorable. There's this one track called Call the Cops, which like creates this whole beat around like police sirens and stuff, and I'm like, this is really cool. Like, and I constantly think of that one. So I don't think that it's gotten any less memorable, to be honest. I think we just remember it for different reasons.
And how do you think music is going to evolve with this coming generation we have with PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Series X, I think, if I got that right. There's lots of talks about, these brand new sound chips and all this hardware improvements. Do you think it's going to make a big difference to how music is going to be produced and the types of music we're going to be seeing in the next generation?
Yeah, I haven't done too much sort of research into that, about like what the next generation is going to bring in terms of audio. But I in the little bits of like that I've heard from composer interviews and that sort of stuff, I mean, dynamic interactive music is only going to grow. So like music that reacts to the gameplay, and that's only going to become bigger and bigger as like the consoles become more powerful and have the ability to kind of do that, and as composers get more ambitious with it. I remember an interview with Disaster Piece, who did the soundtrack for like Hyper Light Drifter and stuff, and Fez. He said that like the next big sort of arena is like 3D music, and this has implications in like virtual reality and stuff, but it's more like making the world like this sort of inhabitable space, and having the music, it's a bit more than just like music fading in and out when you get closer to something or something like that's very basic sort of idea of it, but there's a lot more that kind of can be done with it. I know like I think it's the most recent Last of Us game, like they have, or it was even Final Fantasy, maybe it was Final Fantasy I'm thinking of, Final Fantasy VII Remake, where like, walls and stuff will like impact the flow of sound, and that sort of stuff. So that takes a lot of processing to kind of like work out. So there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of exciting things in the works. I'm not terribly familiar with any of it, to be honest.
No, it might be just a marketing thing, to be honest, what they're doing, this new amazing sound chip kind of thing. What did they call that chip on the PlayStation 2? The reality chip or something. They had like this strange name for the chip in the PlayStation 2 that to control AI. It might be one of those similar ideas. With your Celeste video, you made your Celeste video about 2 years ago. It was your most popular one, just under 520,000 views. And in it, you described that you were looking for more ways to deal with your anxiety. Since then, how have you been tackling your anxiety? And is it still something that you have to manage during your life?
Yeah. So that was a really tough sort of period in my life. So as I mentioned earlier, I kind of was like, I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to give myself a year, do like YouTube stuff. And you'll notice that that's about like just after about a year that into the channel. So that was a time which I was like, is this successful? Is it not successful? Do I continue this? Do I see what happens with it? Or do I just go back to kind of what I was doing before and keep this as a hobby? Problem was I was experiencing probably the biggest growth of my channel around that time. Off the back of the Breath of the Wild video, and the Undertale video started doing well, and the underwater video started doing well. And so I was like, I don't know what to do right now. At that same time, there was this... so one of the kind of groups that encouraged me to kind of take online video seriously, and like video game analysis seriously. We have this show in Australia called Good Game. It's part of it's a TV show on like our national broadcaster on the ABC, which is like the equivalent of the BBC or the CBC.
Yep.
And it was this show like dedicated to video game reviews, and it was incredible. Like they really took it seriously. The sort of reviews you would get were, I would say, better than anything you'd get off like ING or GameSpot, or like, on par with them.
Yeah.
And it was paid for by the government and taxpayer dollars. It was incredible. But they started this online show called Pocket, Good Game Pocket. And it was a daily online show, just news and gameplay, this sort of stuff. And this incredible community formed around it. And that got cancelled. Like the ABC gets all these cuts, and two of the guys, one of the reviewers on the main show and the main guy from Pocket, they decided to kind of leave and do their own show on this other network television station. And in response, they just canned the whole show. Instead of getting new hosts and stuff, they just canned it. Mm-hmm. Which is the dumbest move that they've ever made. So with this new show starting up, they went for first season and went all right. And then second season, they were hiring an editor. And it was around like the beginning of 2018. And I'm like, I'm part of this community. I know how to edit videos now. I've got a sort of a bunch of stuff under my belt to show. I'm going to apply. And I got through to like interview rounds and all that kind of stuff. But like I didn't get the job. And, you know, I'd applied for lots of jobs in that sort of area before, and never got them. But like this one kind of just broke me in a weird sort of way. Yeah. And I was like, what do I do now? Like that was like my one sort of like opportunity, my best opportunity to get into the, get this into the field, and into that career. And I've missed it. And I don't know what to do now. And that's a time when my anxiety really flared up. And I kind of recognized for the first time that I had problems with anxiety. And because my anxiety doesn't, like I don't get panic attacks all that often. And that was kind of my idea and understanding of what anxiety looks like. But I kind of I shut down. I stop working. I can't bring myself to do anything. I just like stay in bed all day. And the doctor was like, that sounds like depression to me. And I'm like, yeah, maybe it is, but also like it's very entwined with anxiety. So that was the period of my life that I kind of experienced at the worst, I would say, which is great, like that I haven't had it any worse than what that was, because that was fairly fine. But that taught me a lot in that time of like, I think just like recognizing it as part of it, and just learning how to deal with that and recognize it when it comes up, and work through it, because sometimes you just have to sit with it, other times you just got to kind of make yourself do it. So in recent years, things have been much better, definitely better than that period of my life. There is definitely still a lot of anxiety around, especially as I do want to kind of do online video stuff full time. And I'm very like upfront about that. I've always been very upfront that I want to do this as a career. So there is still a lot of anxiety that goes around that, and that definitely does impact my workflow a lot of like some days. But I'm getting better at handling it.
Oh, good. And when you sit down to play a game, say for fun, say you're not playing Streets of Rage 4, you're not making a video, you just want to play a game. Do you find it hard to disconnect and just sit there and play the game without, say, looking into the music in such depth and thinking, I can make a video on this, I should take some notes? Do you find it hard to just kind of play a game now you have this YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's very hard. I'm sure everyone says that it is very hard, because it is very hard to disconnect yourself, because that's kind of just the way you think about games. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, to be honest, because that's what I enjoy. That's what I really enjoy about games. I potentially like talking about games more than I enjoy playing games, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like that's where my enjoyment comes from. So it's actually okay. But I do very much try to disconnect myself for things that I know I'll enjoy. So when I was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, that was so important to me, that game. And I was playing it for enjoyment. Like I was enjoying it for playing it for enjoyment. And so I was like, I know I'm going to make a video about this. I 100% will. I have to. Because I want to talk about it. But I'm not thinking about it for the first playthrough. I'm just like, things will come to me and I'll write down notes and stuff, but like I'm not recording my footage, and that's a big thing. Like for me, if I don't record the footage, then it kind of enables me to just enjoy it a little bit more. So I didn't record my footage, and I made sure just to enjoy the game for every aspect of it, not just its music. But I just happened to notice music things, obviously, a lot, because that's just who I am. So I'll write little notes and that sort of stuff, and then come back to it. And after I'm finished, be like, okay, let's work on this video.
Yeah, it must be pretty difficult. Just maybe you could play a game without the audio and just watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was watching a Twitch stream a few weeks back, and there was this blind person playing. I think they played through all the way of Last of Us 2, like 100% blind. My brain could not fathom how somebody could do that. Like, I don't know how they set up a Twitch stream to start with.
That's incredible. Good on them.
Yeah, good for them. Looking back at your channel again, is there a video that you noticed that things really started to take off for you, that you can look back and say, oh yeah, the video about, I don't know, underwater music was the one that kind of set things in motion for me? Or was there a video that you noticed kind of put you to where you are now?
Funny you should mention the underwater video, because it is one of them. That video was really important for me because it was the first time that I sort of figured out a writing style or a writing process that really worked for me. Mm-hmm. And so I separate the channel into like seasons. And so the first season of Game Score Fanfare is like the first 5 videos. And it's like my pilot season. I came up with all the ideas at once. I worked on them all at once, and they are all different sort of ideas. So one is about, underwater music. It's a more cultural sort of thing. It's looking at many games and how they do this one specific thing. But then there's, one about, I focused on Grant Kirkhope. So I focused on a composer for one. I focused on like an entire game, so Bravely Default for one. I focused on a specific moment, You're Not Alone, in Final Fantasy IX for one. But yeah, it was the underwater video that I was like, oh, like I've got this idea, but then I go this like level deeper, and that's like my true sort of story. And then I was like, oh no, there's one more layer. So it took me like 3 layers of depth to like finally make my point that I wanted to make something unique that like people haven't been saying before. And so that was really important in that way. The journey video, which came right after it, was also really important. I think it's probably still one of the best videos I've made. Because I legitimately think I brought something new and unique to the conversation. Yeah. Surrounding that game and around music, game music, and that kind of set the tone for the whole next season of Game Score Fanfare, which was just kind of talking about how music and story and like gameplay all kind of like intermingle.
Yes.
So that one was really important as well.
Yeah, I think I learned a new phrase from watching your videos, a leitmotif.
Yeah.
Heard that a lot. That's a new word that I learned from watching your videos.
Yeah, there's leitmotif is very interesting. And people love leitmotif, man. Like the moment you mention leitmotif, people dig it up. I think it's just this kind of easy to understand concepts that you can't unsee. Like once you know about it, and once you hear it, you kind of can't unhear it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think people really like, they eat it up, leitmotif stuff.
When people say, ludonarrative dissonance, it's like, ooh. It's
Exactly.
kind of the same vein, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Looking at your videos again, is there ever a video that you hoped would take off more than it did compared to, say, some of the others? So you thought, okay, there's a point here that I really strongly wanted to get across, and I feel like I did, but maybe the views didn't quite reflect what you thought it would?
I would say, I'm just going to my channel to like have a look.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Of what videos I've actually made. Look, everything that I've made like this year, I thought would do better than it has.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm very inconsistent with uploading, and I think that impacts the kind of favor that the channel sees with the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
And I think also I might have made a mistake in making those album videos because I'm kind of splitting my audience, and then, you know, half of my audience isn't watching, and then YouTube algorithm is like, oh, people aren't interested in this channel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I have noticed that basically everything I've done this year hasn't reached the views that things used to. Even though I feel like the topics are bigger, are more relevant to people, are more interesting to people. And I basically everything this year I thought would do better, but has not. And that's okay. Like, I'm not doing it for views. I try and convince myself. And there are people out there who are really enjoying it, and like that core audience is still there, and that's really great. But I like to think that even if they were making 0 views, I'd still be making them, because like I just want to talk about these things, and I just want to learn. I just want to like learn how to write better, how to edit better. I just want to make something. So while I'm not like terribly concerned with it, there's also like, if I was getting more views, then like I could be doing this full time and like improving myself even better. And that's really the only sort of like the thing that gets me down about it, is that I just want to do it more, you know?
Yeah, I completely understand.
And you need views to do it.
You do. It's the unfortunate reality in some regards, isn't it? But yeah, I've loved every video you've made. I've watched all of them in preparation for this, and they've been absolutely lovely. You know, I'm not religious myself, but I very much enjoyed the Crisis of Faith video, because in my mind, thinking about Christian music, you know, you think of people with an acoustic guitar singing "Jesus loves me," that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting to see the other side of it, where the subtleties of Christian music. I find that very interesting. Along with some of the other ones I was a particular fan of was the Journey one that you mentioned as well. Reminded me of my experience with that game, because I played it many years ago, and a lot of things ran true for that as well. Thank
you.
No problem. I do have one last question for you before we finish up today, if you don't mind. Looking at your finding peace in Fisherman's Horizon video, the style for that one was rather different compared to the others. Do you ever intend to make one in that similar style again? And what was the reasoning behind making a video in that style, you know, where you had the camera on you more often than not?
So that video, I made it because, well, ultimately because I reached a Patreon goal, and I said I would. I said I'd make a video about Final Fantasy VIII, and I was like, I don't know how I can talk about Final Fantasy VIII. It's the most important thing in the world to me. But it kind of revealed itself to me as I was going through that sort of anxious period in my life, and I was kind of returning to this song and this place a lot, and I was like, I can rein in that idea and just talk very specifically about Fisherman's Horizon. And it was going to be a very personal video, obviously. And I think it just felt right to kind of present myself because it was going to be a personal and honest video.
Yeah.
That, you know, I wanted to show my face. And I don't have anything against showing my face. I've done it in a couple of videos. I've done it on my Warriors of Light My Teeth video for Final Fantasy 1 to 3.
On your Twitter page.
It's on my Twitter page. I did it for my Unraveling the Perfect Pokerap video as well. So I've got like no qualms about that. It comes from my experience doing YouTube vlogs back in the day, which was all like me on camera.
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly comfortable being in front of the camera. And it just felt really right for that video and the angle it was taking to make it a bit more personal. And the fact that I'm talking about myself for so long, it's like, you got to find footage for that stuff. And I'm not someone who just like throws game footage underneath and just lets it play and talks on top of it. Like, I need the visuals to reinforce what's happening, like with the audio. And so for that, the most obvious thing was to speak to the camera. And yeah, I'd love to do more of that in the future. I don't really have a good setup or anything to do that. But yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to appearing on camera more. I did it a couple months ago with the Unraveling video. So yeah.
Awesome. That's really cool. I think we'll have to end it there, Matthew, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much and it's been really, really good. So I wish you all the best, and I cannot wait for that Streets of Rage 4 video to come out. And yeah, it's been a really good time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really lovely talking, and I really appreciate like all the sort of effort you went to and the research that you actually do. It's great. So you're doing good work here.
Oh, thank you. Have a good one.
No worries. Thank you very much. See ya.